I didn't knock. I didn't even call out. Because the sight that hit me froze my heart harder than the 20-mile-an-hour winds cutting through that mountain town. My daughter Sophia, my only child, was curled in a wooden chair on the porch, snow clinging to her hair, her thin blouse soaked through, her lips purple. 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and she'd been left outside like an unwanted pet. Inside, through the big picture window, I saw golden light, a roaring fire, and Jason's family raising their glasses. Laughter spilled out like a cruel soundtrack, drowning out the sound of my daughter's chattering teeth. I ripped off my heavy coat and wrapped it around her shivering body. Her skin was ice, her breath as shallow. "Mom," she whispered, voice so weak it barely stirred the air. And then she slumped against me. I pressed her to my chest and kicked the door open with my boot. The room went silent. Wine glasses in midair, turkey steaming on the table, expensive decorations, silver ribbons, twinkling lights, all of it suddenly felt grotesque, obscene. Janet, Jason's mother, raised one penciled eyebrow, glass of Merlot in her hand. "Well, Deborah, this is unexpected." "Unexpected?" My voice cracked like a whip. "My daughter was freezing outside while you all laughed by the fire. That's what you call unexpected?" Jason appeared from behind her, his shirt half unbuttoned, a wine bottle in his fist, a smirk plastered on his face. "She wanted some fresh air. Don't overreact." Fresh air, in sub-freezing temperatures. I laid Sophia on the couch, tucking the coat around her like a shield. Her shoulders still trembled under the layers. I brushed a strand of wet hair from her forehead. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Broken. I turned back to them, fists shaking. "You think this is a game?" She could have gone into hypothermic shock. Ronald, the patriarch, rose slowly from the head of the table, tall, broad-shouldered, with the air of a man used to commanding courtrooms. "This is a family matter, Deborah. Don't make a scene." My laugh came out sharp, bitter. "A family matter? Throwing your daughter-in-law outside until she nearly freezes to death? That's not family. That's abuse." The words hung in the air like a crack of thunder. Jason's sister Megan scoffed, swirling her wine. "Oh, please. Sophia's always pretending to be fragile. It's pathetic." I felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth hurt. Every muscle in my body screamed to unleash the fighter in me, the years of discipline I'd drilled into students on the mat. But I forced my hands to stay still. This wasn't about fists. This was about truth. I crouched beside Sophia, whispering, "You're safe now. I'm here." Her eyes fluttered open, red and wet. "Mom, I can't." Her voice broke. "Shh," I soothed, stroking her damp hair. "Save your strength. We're leaving." But Jason stepped closer, blocking the doorway. His smugness was a mask, but underneath I caught the flicker of fear. He knew what he'd done looked bad. Very bad. "You're not taking her anywhere," he said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "This is my house." I rose to my full height. Years of coaching gave me a stance that didn't need words. My glare locked on his. "Then your house is about to be a crime scene." His smirk faltered. I pulled out my phone. "We're calling the police. Tonight." That was when the door swung wider, cold air rushing in. And there stood Officer Kevin Martinez, one of my former students, now in uniform, patrol car parked at the curb. His hand rested on the radio at his shoulder. His eyes swept the room, landed on Sophia trembling on the couch, then on Jason's smug face, and finally on me. "Coach?" he said, voice low, steady. "Kevin," I answered, never breaking eye contact with Jason. "You arrived just in time." For a moment's silence. The crackling fireplace, the clink of ice in a glass, the shallow breath of my daughter. Then Kevin stepped forward, his presence filling the doorway like a wall no one could push past. "Somebody wants to explain," he said evenly, "why this young woman was left outside in freezing weather." Nobody spoke. I did. Because they wanted to break her spirit. Kevin's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked to Sophia, then back to me. He gave a slight nod, an unspoken promise. Jason bristled, his voice rising. "This is ridiculous. She's exaggerating. Everyone's exaggerating." But his words rang hollow against the sight of Sophia's pale face. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the wine on his breath. "No, Jason. The only exaggeration here is the lie you've built around yourself. And it's ending tonight." Kevin's hand hovered near his radio. The Whitlock family exchanged nervous glances. Janet's painted lips thinned. Ronald's face darkened, calculating. Megan rolled her eyes, but her hand trembled as she set down her glass. The balance in the room had shifted. I looked back at Sophia, fragile but alive, and felt a steel resolve harden inside me. This wasn't just about Christmas Eve. This was about every insult, every dismissal, every cruel word that had been thrown at her like stones. And I wasn't going to let another one land. "Pack your things, Sophia," I said firmly, though my voice softened at her name. "You're coming home with me." Jason tried to protest, but Kevin's voice cut him off. "Let her go." The fire snapped loudly, sparks shooting up the chimney. In that moment, I realized the fight had only just begun. The Whitlocks had power, money, and connections. But I had something stronger, a mother's fury, a lifetime of discipline, and the truth burning like a torch in my chest. As I lifted Sophia into my arms, I stared Jason down. "You thought she was weak. You thought you could break her. But you forgot one thing: she has me." I turned to Kevin. "Write it up, every detail, tonight." Kevin nodded, pulling out his notepad. "Yes, ma'am." Behind me, the Whitlocks bristled, but none dared stop me. The snow crunched under my boots as I carried Sophia out into the night. The cold bit at my skin, but inside I was fire. Because no one, not Jason, not his family, not even the broken system I knew we'd face next, was going to take my daughter's dignity away. Not while I still drew breath. The crunch of snow under my boots echoed in my ears as I carried Sophia away from that cursed house. Each step felt heavier, but not from her weight. She was light as a feather in my arms. No, it was the fury pressing down on me, the rage of a mother who'd seen her child treated like less than nothing. By the time we reached my apartment on the edge of town, the night had gone quiet. The kind of quiet where every sound feels like a warning. I unlocked the door, nudged it open with my shoulder, and stepped inside. The heater hummed weakly, filling the small living room with a faint warmth. My space wasn't much. One worn sofa, shelves lined with old coaching trophies, and family photos of Sophia at every age, but it was safe. I laid her gently on the couch. Her face was pale, lips tinged blue. I grabbed every blanket I had, wrapping her like a cocoon. She stirred, whispering, "Mom." "I'm here," I said, brushing damp strands of hair from her cheek. "You're safe now." But safety was a fragile illusion. Her skin still held the sting of frost. I filled a kettle, poured steaming water into a basin, and dipped towels, pressing them carefully to her arms. She winced, shivering harder. "It's okay, sweetheart. Warmth hurts before it heals." Once the color began to return to her cheeks, I picked up the phone and dialed the only person I trusted for this kind of pain. Dr. Mia Torres, an old colleague from the community center who'd switched careers into trauma counseling. She answered on the second ring. "Deborah?" Her voice carried concern. "It's late. What happened?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "It's Sophia. She was left outside tonight. 32 degrees. She's in shock, Mia. And it's worse than that. They've been tearing her apart for years." Silence. Then firm and steady. "Bring her to my office first thing in the morning. I'll make room. She needs more than warmth. She needs care for her soul." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thank you. I owe you." "You owe me nothing. Just don't wait too long. Depression and trauma compound faster than frostbite." I hung up, looking down at Sophia. She was dozing, her breath shallow, uneven. My baby. My little girl, who used to climb into my lap and beg for bedtime stories. And now broken, fragile, nearly frozen because a family of cowards wanted to crush her spirit. I sat at the kitchen table, anger boiling into focus. If the Whitlocks thought they could bury her alive under shame, they'd forgotten who her mother was. I pulled out a box from the cabinet, bank receipts, wire transfers, notes in my handwriting. Over 3 years, I'd sent her nearly $58,000. Money meant for comfort, security, and a cushion to help her build a home. Yet the house she lived in didn't even have footprints shoveled in the snow. Where had it all gone? Jason's suits, wine, vacations? I spread the receipts across the table, paper snow drifting in a storm of betrayal. Sophia stirred on the couch, murmuring. I went to her side. She gripped my hand weakly, eyes glassy. Mom, I tried so hard, but after the babies… Her voice cracked, the memory too sharp to finish. My chest tightened. I remembered every phone call. The sobs, the silence on the other end when words ran out. 4 miscarriages. 4 graves were dug in her heart. And instead of compassion, the Whitlocks had branded her useless. I stroked her hair. It wasn't your fault, Sophia. Never. Her tears slipped silently, soaking into my sleeve. She fell back asleep, exhaustion winning. I returned to the table, arranging receipts in order, my pen scratching notes in the margins. Dates, amounts, purposes. A timeline of love turned into ammunition. If they wanted to play legal games, fine. I'd play too, but this time, I'd win. The room was still except for the hum of the heater. Then a faint rustle, a whisper of paper sliding across wood. I froze. At the front door, a thick envelope had been shoved under the crack. No knock, no voice, just the quiet delivery of malice. My pulse spiked. I grabbed it, tearing it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper, words scrawled in a messy hand. Stop fighting, or you'll end up as miserable as your daughter. Give up. My fist clenched around the paper until it crumpled into a ball. My eyes burned, but not with fear, with fire. They thought this would scare me? That I'd back down because of some coward's note? I stood, marched to the trash, and hurled it in. The sound echoed louder than it should have, like a gavel slamming down. No, I whispered to the empty room. You don't get to win. Not this time. I sat back at the table, pulled the receipts closer, and wrote across the top page in bold letters, Evidence, Whitlock case. The clock ticked past midnight. Snow kept falling outside, blanketing the world in silence. But inside me, something had awakened. Not just anger, not just fear, a purpose. Tomorrow, Dr. Mia would see Sophia. And soon after, a lawyer would see these receipts. They'd drawn first blood. Now it was my turn. The morning light crept through the blinds, pale and cold. Sophia was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in blankets like a fragile shell. I brewed coffee, the bitter aroma filling my small apartment, but it did nothing to calm the storm in my chest. On the table lay the receipts I'd spent half the night organizing. 3 years, $58,000. Rent money, grocery support, house upgrades, every check cashed, every transfer withdrawn. Yet Sophia's slippers had holes. Her coat was threadbare, her life hollowed out. I snapped a photo of the stacks, labeling them on my phone. Evidence, financial exploitation. If Jason wanted to parade around as the responsible husband, the numbers told another story. By 9 o'clock, I had an appointment. Paul Henderson, a lawyer I'd met years back when one of my students needed protection from an abusive spouse. Paul was sharp, relentless, and most importantly, not intimidated by families with connections. I eased Sophia awake, whispering, "I'll be gone for a bit, sweetheart. Kevin will check in." She nodded weakly, eyes clouded but grateful. I kissed her forehead and left, the winter air biting my skin like knives. Paul's office was tucked above a diner, the kind of place where the smell of frying bacon seeped through the floorboards. His desk was stacked with case files, law books opened mid-thought, coffee stains on the corners. But his eyes steady, piercing, focused immediately on me. "Deborah," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I heard about last night. Kevin filled me in." I sat, sliding the folder of receipts across his desk. "This is 3 years of support, $58,000. Sophia saw almost none of it. He flipped through the papers, nodding slowly. Misappropriation of funds, financial abuse. Combined with the incident last night, we can build a strong petition. I exhaled, tension easing just a notch. "What's our first step?" "2 fronts," he said. 1. Emergency protective order. Jason and his family can't contact or approach Sophia until a judge reviews the case. 2. Begin divorce proceedings on her behalf. We'll argue not just for separation, but for recognition of domestic emotional abuse. That changes property division, custody if children existed, which in this case, miscarriages matter. Courts are inconsistent, but we try. "Cost?" I asked, though I already knew. "Retainer. $12,000. My rate is $275 an hour. This will be a fight. They'll throw everything at us." I gritted my teeth. I'll find it. I'm not letting her drown while they drink champagne. Paul leaned forward, his voice low. Ronald's history on the bench will scare most attorneys, but not me. I don't care if he spent 30 years judging others. He doesn't get to be judge and jury in his daughter-in-law's life. A fire lit in my chest. Finally, someone who matched my fury with strategy. We spent the next hour drafting the outline. I signed documents, initialed forms, and scheduled our first filing for the following week. By the time I left, my head throbbed, but my resolve had never been sharper. Back at my apartment, Kevin was on the sofa chair, boots planted wide, chatting gently with Sophia. He'd brought her hot tea and a small poinsettia plant. She smiled faintly, the first smile I'd seen in days. But my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop dragging lawyers into this. Next time, you won't just find her outside, you'll find her gone." My blood turned to ice. I showed Kevin. His jaw clenched, knuckles white around the phone. "Deborah, this is criminal intimidation. I'll log it officially." Sophia overheard, her face paling. "Mom, maybe we should just let it go. I don't want them hurting you." I crouched by her side, gripping her hands. "No, sweetheart, that's what abusers count on silence. We're not giving them that gift." She nodded slowly, tears brimming but unfallen. That night, exhaustion hit me like a hammer. Still, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table again, documents spread like weapons ready for battle. Sophia's breathing in the next room was uneven, haunted. Every time she stirred, I pictured her on that porch, snow biting into her skin. I opened a new notebook, scribbling the header, "Timeline of Abuse." Underneath, I listed each incident Sophia had told me in hushed phone calls, the miscarriages, the mocking comments, the silent dinners where she was treated like a ghost. I added last night in bold, "Left outside in 32 degrees Fahrenheit weather, nearly hypothermic." Witness, Officer Kevin Martinez. The pen shook in my hand, but I pressed harder, carving the truth into paper. At midnight, my phone lit up again. Jason, this time. His voice oozed arrogance through the speaker. "You really think Paul Henderson can save you? My father knows every judge worth knowing. You'll spend your retirement savings chasing shadows. And Sophia? She'll crawl back once you're broke. That's what useless women do." I closed my eyes, forcing calm into my voice. "You don't scare me, Jason. You never will." He chuckled, a sound dripping with contempt. "Then you haven't learned how the game is played." The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone, fury pulsing in my veins. For a moment, I wanted to hurl it against the wall. Instead, I wrote down his words, every poisonous syllable, evidence. At dawn, I brewed another pot of coffee, poured 2 mugs, and carried one to Sophia. She sat at the window, staring at the pale winter Sunday. "Sweetheart," I said gently, setting the cup down. "Today we see Dr. Mia. She's waiting for us." Her eyes flicked toward me, hesitant but hopeful. "Do you think she can really help?" I squeezed her hand. "She won't just help. She'll remind you of what they tried to erase, that you're worth more than their cruelty." Sophia nodded, sipping carefully, her fingers warming around the mug. A tiny ember of strength glimmered in her eyes. As I gathered my bag and the folder of evidence, I whispered to myself, one battle down, a war ahead. And with Sophia bundled in a coat 2 sizes too big, we stepped into the snow toward the first real step of healing. The bell above the office door chimed softly as I pushed it open, guiding Sophia inside. The warmth hit us instantly, humidified air carrying the faint scent of cinnamon and cloves. Dr. Mia Torres believed healing began with the senses, and her office proved it. Soft lamps instead of harsh fluorescence, shelves lined with books on grief and resilience, 2 armchairs angled like old friends mid-conversation. Sophia hesitated at the threshold, clutching the sleeve of her oversized coat. Her eyes darted, wary, like a deer ready to bolt. I laid a hand on her back. "It's safe here, sweetheart, trust me." "Doctor." Mia rose from behind her desk, a woman in her mid-50s with warm brown eyes and silver strands woven into her dark hair. Her smile was gentle but not pitying. She extended a hand first to Sophia. "You must be Sophia. I'm Mia. Please, come sit." Sophia's grip was timid, but she followed, sinking into the armchair. I sat beside her, though Mia's gaze reminded me this was Sophia's hour, not mine. The session began quietly. Mia asked simple questions: how Sophia slept, how often she ate, what she remembered feeling on Christmas Eve. Sophia's answers came in whispers, each one trembling like a thread stretched too thin. "I didn't feel cold at first," she murmured, staring at her lap. "I just felt empty, like maybe I deserved it." My chest tightened. I wanted to shout, "No, you didn't." But Mia lifted a hand subtly, reminding me to let Sophia speak. "Why do you think you deserved it?" Mia asked softly. "Because I failed," Sophia said, her voice cracking. 4 times, 4 babies. Jason said my body was broken. His mother called me useless. After the last one, I thought, maybe they're right. Tears welled in my eyes. Memories rushed back. Late-night calls where her sobs drowned the line, the sound of silence when she couldn't even speak. I'd been hundreds of miles away at tournaments, whispering empty reassurances while she curled in darkness. And now here she was, finally saying aloud what they'd carved into her soul. Mia leaned forward, her tone firm but kind. "Sophia, miscarriages are not failures. They are tragedies. And the cruelty you've endured after them? That is abuse. Your grief has been magnified by voices telling you to blame yourself. That is not your truth, it is theirs." Sophia's shoulders trembled. For a moment, I thought she might fold inward completely. But then, a single tear slipped down her cheek, and she whispered, "Then why can't I feel like a person anymore?" Mia handed her a box of tissues. "Because when someone is constantly belittled, their brain starts to believe the lies. Depression sets in, trauma deepens. But you are a person, Sophia. You are more than the children you carried or lost. And here, we'll work on reminding you of that." Sophia dabbed her eyes, still hesitant but listening. Mia turned to me briefly. "She'll need steady therapy twice a week to start. Severe depressive symptoms combined with trauma from repeated pregnancy loss. If untreated, the risk of collapse or worse is high. But with structure and safety, recovery is possible." I nodded, jaw tight. "Whatever it takes, I'll cover the sessions. Everyone." Mia smiled faintly. "Money matters less than commitment. And I can already see yours." The rest of the session unfolded slowly, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Sophia revealed how Jason mocked her when she cried, how Megan rolled her eyes whenever she excused herself from family dinners, how Ronald once said in front of everyone, "A woman who can't give us heirs has no standing here." Each confession left me gripping the armrest until my knuckles ached. Mia didn't flinch. She guided Sophia's breathing, grounding her in the moment, reminding her she wasn't alone. By the end, Sophia leaned back, exhausted but lighter, as though the air she breathed had more oxygen than when we arrived. When we left, the hallway outside the office was bustling. A tall man with a notepad tucked under his arm leaned against the wall, chatting with the receptionist. He glanced up as we passed. His eyes lingered on Sophia, noting her trembling hands, her downcast face. Then his gaze shifted to me. "Excuse me," he said, stepping forward politely. "I'm Brian Carter, local press. I couldn't help overhearing there was an incident on Christmas Eve. Police involvement?" My instincts bristled. Reporters meant exposure. Exposure meant retaliation. I tightened my arm around Sophia's shoulders. "That's not your story to tell," I said curtly. But Brian didn't retreat. He lowered his voice. "I cover family court cases. I've seen power tilt the scales. If there's injustice here, the public deserves to know." He slipped a card into my coat pocket before I could refuse. "When you're ready, call me." Sophia tugged at my sleeve, whispering, "Mom, please, not now." I nodded, steering her toward the exit. But as we stepped into the cold, my hand brushed the card in my pocket. Brian Carter, investigative journalist. Another ally? Or another risk? Either way, the circle was widening. I looked at Sophia beside me, fragile yet brave for walking through that door today. One step forward, many battles to go. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, I sat alone in my apartment, the lawyer's folder spread across the table. But my mind wouldn't stay in the present. The scent of cinnamon from Dr. Mia's office still clung to my coat, and with it came memories sharp, uninvited of another dinner long ago. It was nearly 2 years back, the first holiday I'd spent with the Whitlocks after Sophia married Jason. I'd expected warmth, laughter, the blending of families. Instead, I walked into something colder than the December air. Their dining room gleamed mahogany table polished like a mirror, chandelier glowing, plates rimmed in gold. The meal looked like a magazine spread: roasted ham, bowls of sweet potatoes topped with marshmallows, and green bean casserole steaming. But beneath the perfect picture, the atmosphere was brittle, like glass about to crack. Jason sat tall, hand resting possessively on Sophia's chair. She smiled nervously, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I caught that flicker of tension and felt my stomach tighten. Ronald carved the ham with exaggerated precision, his deep voice filling the room. A man needs a wife who can manage a home. It's the foundation of legacy. He didn't look at Sophia, but everyone knew who he meant. Evelyn chuckled, sipping her wine. "Oh, Ronald, don't pressure the poor girl. She's still adjusting." Her smile was sweet as poison. Megan leaned in, her bracelets jangling. "Adjusting? Please. Most women I know had a nursery ready within months of the wedding, but maybe Sophia has other priorities." She dragged the word out like a blade across glass. Sophia's cheeks flushed. She stared at her plate, pushing peas around with her fork. I opened my mouth, ready to snap back, but Jason spoke first. "She tries," he said casually, as if excusing a child's clumsy drawing, "but she gets overwhelmed. Sometimes she locks herself in the bedroom for hours. Doesn't really help with family meals." He shrugged, reaching for the wine. The table chuckled, soft, polite, devastating. The kind of laugh that isolates one person while everyone else bonds over their exclusion. I wanted to slam my fist down, to demand they stop, but Sophia caught my eye, shaking her head ever so slightly. "Don't," her look pleaded. "Not tonight." So I swallowed my rage, forced a smile, and lifted my glass. Cowardice disguised as diplomacy. And I've regretted it every day since. As the evening dragged on, the conversation sharpened. Ronald launched into tales of his years on the bench, peppering them with pronouncements about weak wills and people who couldn't carry their weight. Evelyn nodded sagely, glancing at Sophia each time. Megan's laugh cut the air whenever Sophia tried to speak, dismissing her words before they formed. By dessert, Sophia barely touched her slice of pie. She excused herself, voice thin, retreating upstairs. Jason didn't follow. No one did. They kept eating, kept talking, as though the seat she left behind had never been filled. I remember sitting there, smile frozen, fork clutched in my hand. My daughter, my bright, gentle Sophia, was being erased in front of me, and I said nothing. Now, in my small apartment, the memory burned like acid. If I had spoken then, could things have been different? Could I have stopped the slide before it reached the point of porches and frostbite? I pressed my hands to my face, tears hot against my palms. "I should have fought sooner," I whispered into the quiet. The sound of a knock startled me. I wiped my eyes quickly and opened the door. It was Kevin, his uniform neat despite the late hour. He held a small notebook. "Coach," he said, stepping inside, "I finished my report on Christmas Eve. Everything I saw Sophia outside. Your confrontation. Jason's dismissive remarks, it's all in here. Official record." He tapped the notebook. "It'll go into the system." Relief surged through me like oxygen. "Thank you, Kevin. You don't know how much this means." He gave a small smile. "I know what it's like, feeling powerless against people with money and names, but the system still has cracks where truth can slip in. I'll stand by you whatever comes." I nodded, gripping his arm. In that moment, the regret of the past eased just a little. I couldn't rewrite that old dinner table, but I could rewrite what came next. As Kevin left, the snow falling behind him, I returned to the table. I laid Ronald's smug voice and Evelyn's sweet poison beside Jason's arrogance in my memory, and I swore aloud, "No more silence." Sophia stirred in her sleep, murmuring. I adjusted the blanket over her shoulders, smoothing her hair like I used to when she was a child. Then I sat back, staring at the evidence spread across the table, waiting for dawn. The courthouse doors loomed above us like stone giants, cold and unyielding. I held Sophia's hand as we climbed the steps, each one echoing with the weight of what waited inside. She wore a borrowed coat, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, her eyes downcast. Beside us, Paul Henderson carried his leather briefcase, posture firm, stride steady. "First step," he murmured, glancing at Sophia with a reassuring nod. "We file for a temporary protective order. That buys us breathing room. No contact from Jason or his family until the court decides on longer measures." I squeezed Sophia's hand gently. "Hear that? Breathing room." She tried to smile, but her lips barely curved. Inside, the courthouse smelled of old wood and colder justice. Security lines, metal detectors, clerks shuffling papers. Paul guided us through the maze until we reached a counter. He handed the clerk a thick stack of documents, a petition for divorce, a request for a protective order, and supporting evidence. The clerk flipped through with disinterested efficiency, stamping pages with a loud thunk that made Sophia flinch. "Hearing scheduled for Friday," she said flatly, sliding copies back. "Judge wants preliminary statements on record." Sophia leaned against me, her shoulders trembling. "Mom, I don't know if I can." I cupped her cheek. "You can, because you're not alone anymore." 2 days later, we stood in front of a judge. The courtroom wasn't full yet, just a few lawyers, a bailiff, the scent of stale coffee lingering in the air. Sophia's voice was shaky as she confirmed her request. That Jason stay away, that the harassment stop, that she be given space to breathe. Paul laid out the receipts, the timeline, and the incident on Christmas Eve. "This is not a marriage. This is systematic emotional abuse," he said, his voice sharp. The judge, a man with tired eyes and lines etched deep into his face, rubbed his temple. "Mrs. Whitlock," he addressed Sophia by Jason's last name, which made her flinch, "your claims are serious. But the standard for a protective order requires credible evidence of imminent harm. Your counsel has presented receipts, statements, and a police officer's observation. That's enough to justify temporary relief. Motion granted." A bang of the gavel. Protective order signed. Relief washed over Sophia like a fragile tide. She leaned into me, whispering, "Maybe I can breathe." But as Paul gathered the papers, he leaned close to me. "Temporary orders are just that, temporary. Their lawyers will fight back, and hard. Don't let your guard down." I nodded, gripping the folder tighter. I knew better than to mistake a foothold for victory. That evening after dinner, Kevin stopped by to check on Sophia. He brought groceries, milk, eggs, bread, and his presence filled the apartment with quiet steadiness. He updated us. The protective order had been circulated to patrol units. Any violation, they'd respond. Sophia sat at the table, spooning soup slowly, almost peacefully for once. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, life could start stitching itself back together. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. Social media. A headline under a glossy photo of Jason and his parents at a charity gala. "Whitlock family shows grace amid daughter-in-law's struggles with mental health." I tapped it open. The article painted Sophia as unstable, plagued by episodes of depression, unable to handle the pressures of marriage. Janet was quoted directly, "We've tried to help her. We only want what's best for Sophia, but sometimes people refuse help." My blood boiled. Help? Leaving her to freeze outside was help? Whispering useless behind her back was help? I scrolled further. Anonymous sources suggested Sophia was self-isolating, neglecting household duties, exaggerating personal issues. The story painted the Whitlocks as noble caretakers enduring hardship with patience. Sophia noticed my face had gone pale. "Mom, what is it?" I tried to hide the screen, but she snatched the phone. Her eyes scanned, then widened in horror. Tears welled, spilling fast. "They're making me look crazy," she whispered. "Everyone will think I'm sick, that I made it all up." Kevin cursed under his breath, fists tightening. "This is PR spin. They're shaping the narrative before trial." Paul called minutes later, his voice clipped. "I saw the article. They've hired a public relations firm. It's classic discredit the victim, elevate the family name. Don't respond online. Let me handle it in court." But the court wasn't where reputations lived and died. Not anymore. One story could spread faster than truth, faster than justice. And I knew Janet Whitlock understood that perfectly. Sophia buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "Mom, I can't do this. I can't fight them out there and in here." I pulled her into my arms, holding her as tightly as I could. "You don't have to fight them alone. Let them spend money on lies. We'll spend our time on truth. And truth lasts longer than headlines." Even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. But I had to make her believe. As the night wore on, I sat awake at the table again, the glow of my phone screen burning my eyes. Comments under the article piled up, some sympathetic, but many cruel, echoing the Whitlock's narrative. Maybe she's unstable. Sounds like the family tried. Money grabbed divorce. I clenched my jaw until it hurt. They thought they could buy the story, buy the sympathy, buy the world. But I had one thing they couldn't purchase: the memory of my daughter shivering on that porch, and I would never let the world forget it. Kevin drove that evening, his patrol car off duty. No sirens, just the steady hum of tires on frozen pavement. Sophia sat in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the window, watching streetlights flicker against snowbanks. She hadn't spoken much since the article. We were headed back to Jason's house, not for confrontation, but for something simple: to collect the rest of Sophia's belongings. Clothes, shoes, her grandmother's quilt. Pieces of a life she'd left behind when I carried her out on Christmas Eve. When the house came into view, my stomach tightened. It stood there in its usual perfection: white lights strung across the eaves, wreath on the door, chimney smoke curling like nothing had ever happened. But the air felt wrong. Too still. Too staged. Kevin parked down the street. "I'll walk you up, but I won't go inside unless things turn ugly," he said. "That's fair," I replied, adjusting my scarf. Sophia clutched her bag like a shield. We stepped onto the driveway. That's when I saw it. The front lock had been changed, new brass glinting under the porch light. Sophia froze. They locked me out?" I bent closer. The grooves were clean, unweathered. "Yes, and not long ago." Kevin frowned, pulling out his notepad. "Changing locks without notice, when one spouse still resides here, is a control tactic. Documenting it," he scribbled quickly. Then I noticed the cameras. 2 small black eyes above the garage, another by the porch. They weren't there before. Their little red dots blinked steadily, watching us. Sophia's breath quickened. "Mom, they're recording us." I squeezed her hand. "Let them record. All they're capturing is you trying to retrieve your own belongings." We knocked. No answer. Lights flickered inside. Someone was home. I knocked again, harder. Silence. Finally, Megan's voice came through the door, muffled but sharp. "Protective order or not, Sophia doesn't live here anymore. Everything in this house belongs to Jason." Sophia's lips parted, trembling. "That's not true. My clothes, my quilt." The door remained closed. Megan's words sliced through the wood. "She abandoned it, abandoned him. You don't just walk back in and pick what you want." Oh. Kevin cleared his throat, stepping closer to the door. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Martinez, off duty but present. I suggest cooperation. At a minimum, personal items must be released." A pause. Then footsteps retreating. Silence. "They won't open," Kevin said, shaking his head. "We'll have to file a motion to retrieve belongings. Until then, don't push. They'll spin trespassing claims." I led Sophia back toward the car, her shoulders hunched, tears streaking silently down her face. The house behind us glowed warm, but it felt like a fortress built on spite. Back in my apartment later that night, Paul called. His voice was clipped, urgent. "Jason filed a counter-petition today. He's demanding the court dismiss your abuse claims, arguing Sophia is unstable and fabricating events." I gripped the phone tighter. "On what grounds?" "He's alleging she exaggerates depression for attention. That your financial support," Paul hesitated, "wasn't support at all, but your attempt to control her marriage. He's twisting your receipts into evidence of interference." My jaw clenched. "So the money I gave to make sure she had food and heat, he's painting that as control?" "Yes," Paul said grimly. "And Ronald's influence means the court will listen. We need airtight proof of Sophia's condition, consistent medical testimony, and credible witnesses. Kevin's report helps, but we'll need more." I glanced toward Sophia, who sat curled on the couch, staring blankly at the television without seeing it. My chest ached. "Then we'll get more. Whatever it takes." Paul's voice softened. Deborah, this will be ugly. They're not just defending, they're attacking. Be ready. When the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table again, the same table where I'd sorted receipts, where I'd crumpled that first threat note. Now new papers spread before me. The counter petition, Jason's claims typed neatly in legal jargon, lies wrapped in official language. Words like fabrication, instability, undue influence from mother. Each one was a knife. Sophia looked over, her voice small. Mom, maybe they're right. Maybe I am broken. I rushed to her side, kneeling. Number, listen to me. You are not broken. They want you to believe that because it makes you easier to control. But I've seen your strength. You survived nights darker than this. That isn't weakness, it's proof you're still here. Her eyes glistened, searching my face for truth. I kissed her forehead, holding her like I used to when nightmares woke her as a child. Later, when she finally drifted to sleep, I returned to the table. I stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop as I began drafting a timeline, adding tonight's discovery: changed locks, installed surveillance cameras, denied access to personal property. The wooden walls of their home weren't just walls anymore. They were barriers of power, reinforced by wealth, influence, and malice. But every wall has cracks, and I intended to find them. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the street in silence. Inside, I sharpened my resolve like a blade. This was no longer just about Sophia's freedom. It was about exposing the Whitlock's control for what it was. And I knew, deep in my bones, the next battle would test us harder than any before. The courthouse lobby buzzed like a hive. Lawyers in pressed suits moved briskly, their briefcases clacking against tile. Paul walked beside us, his jaw set, his briefcase heavier than usual. Sophia's hand clutched my arm, trembling. I whispered, "Breathe, sweetheart, one step at a time." When we entered the courtroom, the Whitlocks were already there. Jason wore a sharp gray suit, his tie perfectly knotted. He leaned back in his chair as though the trial were a formality. Beside him, Ronald adjusted his cufflinks, radiating calm authority. Evelyn and Megan sat with perfect posture, their lips curved into polite, poisonous smiles. They looked less like a family defending themselves and more like a panel of judges awaiting our punishment. The bailiff called for order. The judge, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, entered and took his seat. His eyes were stern but distant, as though the outcome was already written. Paul rose first. "Your Honor, this case is about a young woman subjected to years of emotional and financial abuse. On Christmas Eve, she was forced outside in freezing weather while her husband and in-laws celebrated indoors. She nearly succumbed to hypothermia. Officer Kevin Martinez witnessed the aftermath. We ask this court to recognize the pattern of abuse and grant protection and fair division of property." I glanced at Sophia. She sat stiff, her hands clasped tightly. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she held them back, brave even in the face of so many eyes. Jason's lawyer, a sleek man in a navy suit, stood smoothly. "Your Honor, what we have here is not abuse but exaggeration. My client and his family have shown extraordinary patience toward Sophia, who unfortunately struggles with long-standing emotional issues. They've supported her financially, emotionally, and socially. The so-called incident on Christmas Eve was nothing more than a misunderstanding. She stepped outside, as she often does, during bouts of self-isolation." His words dripped with condescension. I gripped the edge of the bench so hard my knuckles whitened. Paul countered quickly. He called Kevin to the stand. Kevin testified clearly. How he arrived that night, how he saw Sophia trembling on the porch, how he heard Jason dismiss it as fresh air. His voice was steady, professional, and undeniable. But then Jason's lawyer struck. "Officer, did you personally see anyone force Sophia outside?" Kevin hesitated. "Number, I arrived after." "Then all you observed was a woman outside on a cold night, correct?" Kevin's jaw tightened. "A woman outside, nearly hypothermic, while her family ignored her." The lawyer smirked. "But that's interpretation, isn't it? Not evidence." The judge raised a hand. "Sustained. Officer, limit yourself to observed facts." Kevin's face flushed with frustration. He glanced at me, silently apologizing. Paul pressed forward, producing a recording Kevin had secretly captured that night, the Whitlocks mocking Sophia, dismissing her miscarriages, calling her useless. When the audio filled the courtroom, a chill ran through me. Jason's voice was cold and cruel. Evelyn's disdain, Megan's cutting laugh. Sophia flinched as though each word reopened wounds. But before the last sentence played, Jason's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This recording was made without consent. It violates state privacy laws. It cannot be admitted." The judge's gaze hardened. Objection sustained. Recording excluded from evidence. The words slammed into me like a hammer. "Sophia's lifeline, our clearest proof, vanished in an instant," Paul protested. "But, Your Honor, the content clearly—" The judge cut him off. "Counselor, I will not allow illegally obtained material. Move on." Across the room, Ronald leaned back, the faintest smile touching his lips. He turned slightly, greeting a clerk with a nod and a warm handshake, as if he were still presiding from the bench. The gesture wasn't lost on me. Influence doesn't vanish with retirement, it lingers like smoke in drapes. My heart pounded. The air in the courtroom felt heavier, tilting toward them. I wanted to shout, to demand fairness, but Paul touched my arm gently, warning me to stay calm. By the end of the session, the judge set dates for further hearings. Temporary orders remained, but no decision would be final for weeks. The Whitlocks left the courtroom as though leaving a dinner party. Ronald shaking hands with two attorneys, Evelyn smoothing her dress, Jason smirking at us like a man who thought he'd already won. Sophia sat slumped on the bench, her face in her hands. "Mom," she whispered, voice breaking, "they're going to bury us." I hugged her tight. "Not if I can help it." Outside in the hallway, I spotted a camera flash. Brian Carter, the reporter we'd met outside Dr. Mia's office, stood quietly near the wall. His lens captured Sophia's tear-streaked face, my arm around her shoulders, the weight of injustice visible in every line. He lowered the camera, meeting my eyes. There was no smirk, no opportunism, only resolve. He mouthed silently, "People will see." For the first time that day, hope flickered inside me. Maybe the court could be manipulated, but the world outside still had eyes. The article went live on a Thursday morning. By the time I brewed my second cup of coffee, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Headlines filled the screen. "Left in the cold, daughter-in-law abandoned on Christmas Eve." Brian's words painted the picture clearly. Sophia shivering outside in freezing weather while her in-laws toasted inside. He quoted Kevin's police notes, highlighted the protective order, and asked the question that burned through every paragraph. Is justice for sale when a family's influence runs deep? The story spread like wildfire. Local news stations picked it up. Social media lit up with outrage. "No woman deserves this. Protect Sophia. Whitlocks think money makes them untouchable." Hundreds of comments poured in, some from people I didn't know, others from women sharing their own stories of being silenced by powerful families. Sophia sat on the couch, her phone in her lap, scrolling with trembling hands. "Mom," she whispered, "people are talking about me. Everyone knows." "They're standing with you," I said gently, though I could see the fear etched in her eyes. "Some aren't." She turned the screen toward me. Among the support were cruel remarks. "She's unstable. Drama queen. Probably exaggerating." Her voice cracked. "They're saying exactly what Jason wants them to say. That I'm broken. That I made this up." I sat beside her, pulling her close. "Sweetheart, remember what Mia told you. Those are their lies, not your truth. And the fact they need to smear you proves they're afraid." She nodded faintly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Later that afternoon, we met with Dr. Mia in her office. She listened carefully as Paul outlined the case, his voice calm but urgent. "We need expert testimony," he said. "Someone who can explain to the court the psychological impact of repeated miscarriages combined with constant verbal abuse. Someone credible, unbiased, respected." Mia folded her hands, her gaze steady. "I can do that. I've worked with survivors for 30 years. I know how trauma rewires the brain, how words can wound deeper than fists. But understand, testifying comes with cost, both emotional and financial. The court requires a retainer for expert witnesses. It will be around $3,500. I didn't even blink. "We'll pay it." Sophia looked at me horrified. "Mom, you can't. That's too much." "Hush," I said, squeezing her hand. "What's money compared to your freedom? I'll cover it. Mia's voice softened. It's not just money. It's also time for questions and cross-examination. They'll try to tear me down, too. But I won't waver. Sophia deserves her truth to be heard. For the first time in weeks, I saw a spark in my daughter's eyes. A fragile spark, but there nonetheless. When we left, the winter sun broke through the clouds, faint but golden. For a moment, it felt like light was on our side. That evening, Kevin stopped by with groceries again. He dropped off apples, bread, and a jar of honey, then sat at the table as Paul arrived with new documents. Paul looked tired, his tie loosened, but his eyes burned with determination. "They've filed their counter motions," he said, flipping open a folder. "They're pushing hard to dismiss abuse claims, insisting Sophia fabricated everything. But," he pulled out a sheet of paper, his tone shifting, "we may have a crack." He slid the page across the table. It was a printed email, forwarded anonymously. The subject line read, "Favor regarding Whitlock case." The body was short, but it made my blood run cold. "Appreciate your understanding as we navigate this delicate matter. Ronald has served our system faithfully for decades. A small courtesy here would not go unnoticed." Sophia's eyes widened. "They're bribing?" Paul shook his head. "Not outright. This is influence. Subtle, but powerful. A suggestion. A reminder of favors owed. But if this email can be authenticated, it could shift the narrative. Judges don't like the appearance of corruption, especially under a public spotlight." Kevin leaned forward, fists on the table. "So someone inside leaked this. Someone wants the truth out." I stared at the page, my heart pounding. "Then we use it. We shine a light so bright they can't hide in their shadows anymore." Paul nodded slowly. "Careful. If we move too soon, they'll dismiss it as hearsay. We need to confirm the source and secure a chain of custody. But if this holds," he exhaled a rare hint of hope, "it could change everything." Sophia sat back, clutching her mug of tea. Her hands still trembled, but there was steel in her voice. "They wanted to bury me, but if people are finally seeing them for who they are, maybe I don't have to stay silent anymore." I placed my hand over hers, meeting her gaze. "You never did." Outside, the city buzzed with whispers of the Whitlocks. The battle had leapt beyond court filings into the court of public opinion. And for the first time, we weren't losing ground. But I knew better than to celebrate. The Whitlocks wouldn't go down easy. They would fight back harder, meaner, dirtier. And the judge still held the gavel. The email lay on the table, a single sheet of paper carrying the weight of a storm. The next hearing was only days away. And I had a sinking feeling the verdict wouldn't be justice, it would be something far crueler. The courtroom was packed that morning. Every bench is filled, whispers rippling like restless wind. Reporters lined the back row, pens poised, cameras hidden in bags despite the warnings. Sophia sat beside me, her hands twisting in her lap, pale but resolute. Paul stood tall at our table, files stacked neatly. Across the aisle, the Whitlocks looked like royalty at a coronation. Jason adjusted his tie with practiced ease. Ronald whispered to an attorney. Evelyn smoothed her dress, and Megan smirked. They radiated confidence, as if the verdict had already been sealed. The judge entered, his gavel echoing like a hammer striking stone. "Court is in session." His voice carried no warmth, no patience. Paul began with strength. He presented receipts of my support, Kevin's police report, and Dr. Mia's preliminary statement of Sophia's depression diagnosis. He painted the story as clearly as truth allowed. A young woman isolated, belittled, abandoned in freezing weather. Then Jason's lawyer rose, gliding forward like a predator. He framed Sophia as unstable, suggested my financial help was manipulation, and called Kevin's testimony opinion masquerading as fact. He sneered at Mia's evaluation, dismissing it as subjective psychology. Sophia shrank lower in her seat with every barb. I reached for her hand, gripping tightly. When the time came for closing remarks, Paul's voice carried fire. "Your Honor, at its heart, this case is about dignity. A woman denied warmth, denied safety, denied respect by the very people who vowed to protect her. This court must send a message. Abuse is not acceptable, no matter the name or wealth attached to it." The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "This court recognizes the divorce petition. Effective immediately, Sophia Whitlock is dissolved from marriage to Jason Whitlock. A collective gasp swept the room. Sophia's breath caught, tears springing to her eyes. Freedom, finally. But the judge wasn't finished. As for claims of abuse, there is insufficient admissible evidence to meet the legal threshold. The court cannot substantiate allegations based on contested testimony and inadmissible recordings. Therefore, domestic abuse is not recognized in this ruling. Oh. My stomach dropped. The judge continued, voice dry as parchment. Regarding property division, given Jason Whitlock's greater financial contributions to the marriage, the majority of shared assets are awarded to him. Sophia Whitlock is granted a modest settlement, deemed fair under the circumstances. The gavel struck once, final. For a moment, silence. Then whispers swelled, like a wave crashing. Some gasped, others shook their heads. Sophia's tears turned from relief to devastation. "Mom," she whispered, voice breaking, "they took everything." I pulled her into my arms, my chest burning. "Not everything, sweetheart. You're free." But inside, rage clawed at me. Free, but stripped of dignity. Free, but branded as unstable. Free, but penniless. Jason leaned across the aisle, his smirk slicing like a blade. He whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "Told you." She crawls away with scraps. Evelyn's lips curled into a smile of satisfaction. Megan stifled a laugh. Ronald sat back, calm and proud, as though orchestrating another perfect verdict. I shot to my feet. My voice rose before I could stop it. "This isn't justice. This is power protecting itself." The judge's gavel slammed. "Order? Sit down or be removed." Paul tugged my sleeve. "Deborah, don't. Not here." I sank back into my seat, trembling. My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Blood pounded in my ears. Every instinct screamed to stand, to shout, to rip through the lies. But Sophia's fragile form beside me kept me anchored. She needed strength, not chaos. When the session ended, the Whitlocks rose gracefully, greeting acquaintances, shaking hands as though they'd just won a social award. Jason walked past us, pausing only to murmur, "You wasted your money. She'll come crawling back." I glared at him, every muscle in my body taut, but I stayed silent. Not because I was afraid, because I knew silence sometimes cuts deeper. Sophia buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing quietly. "It's not fair. Why does he win again?" I stroked her hair. "Because they bought a piece of the system. But fairness isn't handed down from benches, it's built in the long fight." As we left, cameras clicked. Brian stood among the reporters, his eyes locked on us. His expression wasn't pity, it was fury. He mouthed 2 words as he snapped a photo of Sophia clinging to me. Not over. That night, back in my apartment, I laid the court documents on the table. The ink of the ruling was still fresh, but already it smelled like rot. Sophia slept fitfully in the next room, her small settlement meaningless against the wealth Jason now controlled. I stared at the papers, my hands shaking, my chest heavy. The Whitlocks thought they'd won, but I knew better. This wasn't the end. It was only the middle. And sometimes, the middle of a story is when the real fight begins. The envelope slid under my apartment door just after midnight. No knock, no footsteps, just the faint scrape of paper on linoleum. I froze where I sat, pen in hand, notes half finished. My pulse quickened. I knew before I even picked it up that this wasn't a bill or a flyer. I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a single photograph. Sophia, asleep on the couch, her face turned toward the window, her blanket pulled up to her chin. The picture was taken from outside, through glass, in my apartment. My stomach lurched. The paper nearly slipped from my hands. Someone had been close enough to watch her sleep, to capture the intimacy of her most vulnerable moment. I rushed to the couch. She was still there, still breathing softly, still fragile but alive. I covered her with an extra blanket, smoothing her hair with shaking hands. My mind reeled, had someone been outside right then? Watching? Waiting? The front door rattled as I threw the locks, my heart pounding against my ribs. I dialed Kevin without hesitation. He arrived within minutes, still in uniform. His eyes hardened when he saw the photo. This isn't intimidation anymore. This is surveillance. Escalation. He checked the window frames, the locks, and the hallway. I'll request a patrol car to circle the block. But Deborah, this means they want you scared enough to fold. They're telling you, we can reach you anywhere. I gripped the photo so tightly it crumpled. Then they underestimate me, because nothing terrifies me more than losing my daughter, and I already came close on Christmas Eve. Kevin crouched, his voice low but steady. I'll do more than patrols. I'll install sensors and cameras. If they come near again, I'll know. They won't touch her. I nodded, fighting tears. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit it aloud. I'm scared, Kevin. He placed a hand gently on my shoulder. Good. Fear keeps us sharp, but don't let it silence you. By morning, Brian was at my door. He looked more serious than ever, a stack of drafts under his arm. I've been digging, he said. That email leak? It wasn't a fluke. I found a string of communications tying Ronald to 2 sitting judges. They coordinated to keep evidence out. Its influence borders on corruption. I stared at him, the photo still burning in my hand. And if you publish? His eyes darkened. They'll come after me too, but sometimes you shine light in dark places and the roaches scatter. People need to see how deep this goes. Sophia stirred awake, overhearing. Please, don't. If they're watching us, if they're sending pictures, what if they hurt you too? Brian knelt by her side, his voice soft. They already hurt you, Sophia. The question is, do we let them keep hurting others? Or do we end it here? Tears welled in her eyes. I just want peace. My heart ached. She was so tired of fighting, so weary of being the battlefield. But I knew peace doesn't grow in shadows, it's earned under light. After Brian left, Kevin stayed behind, setting up small cameras in the corners of the apartment. If they want to watch, let's give them something back, he muttered. We'll catch them in the act. I sat at the table, staring at the photograph again. The fear had settled into my bones, but alongside it was something else resolve. Whoever slipped this under my door thought they were breaking me. Instead, they lit a fire I didn't know I still had. I wrote across the back of the photo in bold black ink, "Not afraid, not finished." Then I tucked it into the folder labeled Evidence, Whitlock Case. Sophia sat beside me, her hand trembling as it slipped into mine. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't know if I can keep standing." I squeezed her fingers, my voice fierce. "Then lean on me, I'll stand for both of us." Outside, the night pressed close against the windows, heavy with unseen eyes. But inside, I felt something shift. Fear was still there, but it was no longer steering me. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was war. The morning Brian's exposé hit the front page. The city shook. The headline screamed, "Justice for Sale? Emails reveal Whitlock influence in family court." His article laid bare the trail of favors, the subtle messages, the invisible strings Ronald had tugged for years. Screens lit up across town, radios buzzed with commentary, social feeds flooded with outrage. For the first time, the Whitlocks weren't untouchable. They were exposed. Reporters swarmed the courthouse that afternoon. Flashbulbs burst as we walked up the steps. Me, Sophia, Paul, Kevin, and Dr. Mia. The crowd chanted Sophia's name. "Protect Sophia." Signs waved. No more silent suffering. For once, the voices outside were louder than the whispers inside. In court, Paul's strategy was sharp. He called Mia first. She walked with quiet dignity to the witness stand, her silver hair glinting under the lights. "Dr. Torres," Paul asked, "based on your professional evaluation, what condition does Sophia suffer from?" Mia's voice was calm but steady. "Severe depression compounded by repeated trauma, specifically from miscarriages and sustained verbal abuse by close family members. These factors combined place her at high risk for self-harm, isolation, and long-term psychological damage. In clinical terms, she is a survivor of emotional abuse." Jason's lawyer tried to rattle her. "Doctor, isn't depression common? Couldn't Sophia simply be oversensitive?" Mia's gaze hardened. "Depression is not oversensitivity. It is an illness worsened by cruelty. Telling a grieving woman she is useless isn't family, it is abuse." The room stilled. Even the judge looked unsettled. Then Paul introduced Kevin. He produced still images from the cameras he'd installed at my apartment. Grainy but clear, a man crouched outside the window, camera in hand. Another frame showed him slipping an envelope under the door. "Do you recognize this man?" Paul asked. Kevin nodded grimly. Private security, long employed by the Whitlocks. I ran the plates on his vehicle registered to a company owned by Ronald Whitlock's law partner. Gasps filled the courtroom. Jason shifted uneasily, his smirk cracking. Evelyn whispered furiously to Megan, her composure slipping. Ronald's jaw tightened, but his calm veneer faltered for the first time. The judge leaned forward. "Are you suggesting the Whitlock family commissioned surveillance of the plaintiff?" Paul's voice was sharp as steel. "I am presenting evidence that Sophia Harper was stalked and intimidated during ongoing proceedings. That intimidation is not only unlawful, it is proof of a pattern control, silencing, and fear, the very essence of abuse." Jason exploded, slamming a fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. She's weak. She always played the victim." His voice cracked, too loud, too raw. Cameras clicked from the back row. His mask was gone. The judge banged his gavel. "Order." But the damage was done. Everyone in that room had seen the real Jason, the venom behind the charm. Paul's closing was short. "This case is not just about one woman. It is about whether power excuses cruelty. Today, you decide if the law protects the vulnerable or shields the arrogant." The judge recessed for an hour. Tension hung thick, every breath heavy. Sophia sat trembling, her hand in mine. "Mom," she whispered, "what if it's still not enough?" I kissed her temple. "It is enough. And even if they twist this again, the truth is out there now. They can't put it back in the shadows." When the judge returned, his face was grave. He spoke slowly, carefully. "This court acknowledges credible evidence of intimidation and emotional abuse. The divorce ruling stands, but property division is revised. The majority of assets awarded to Jason Whitlock are hereby reallocated to Sophia Harper. Furthermore, a restraining order is granted against Jason Whitlock and his immediate family." The gavel struck. Final. A collective exhale filled the courtroom. Sophia's tears spilled, but this time they were tears of release. Kevin patted my shoulder. Mia nodded, her eyes moist. Paul closed his briefcase, his lips curling in a rare smile. Across the aisle, chaos erupted. Evelyn hissed at Ronald, Megan snapped at Jason, and Jason shouted curses under his breath. Ronald's face turned ashen as reporters surged toward him, cameras capturing every crack in his empire. We walked out into the sunlight, cameras flashing, voices rising. Reporters shouted questions, but Brian's voice cut through them all. "Sophia, do you have anything to say to women watching today who feel trapped like you did?" Sophia hesitated, then stood taller than I'd ever seen her. Her voice shook, but it carried. "Don't let them tell you you're worthless. Don't let silence be your cage. There is always someone who will believe you. There is always a way out." The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, tears. Sophia's words soared higher than any verdict. That night, back in our apartment, the air felt lighter. No envelopes slid under the door. No shadows lingered outside the window. Sophia sat at the table, sipping tea, her shoulders no longer bowed. I watched her, my heart swelling with pride. For months she had been buried under lies, but now she was rising, step by step. I thought of Christmas Eve, of the bitter cold, of the firelight mocking us. And I thought of now the warmth in this tiny apartment, the glow of truth burning brighter than any hearth. Justice had not come easily, not cleanly, not perfectly, but it had come. And as I held Sophia's hand across the table, I whispered, "They tried to break you. They forgot you had me." She smiled softly. "No, Mom. They forgot I had myself." The fight was over, but our story, our survival was just beginning.